Developing now, the Trump administration set to announce new sanctions on Iran, which were eased under the 2015 nuclear deal under President Obama. Now, this move is being met by overwhelming opposition by other UN Security Council members, by the way, including American allies. Meanwhile, Joe Biden says he would want the U.S. to rejoin the Iran nuclear deal if he becomes president. Quote, "I will offer Tehran a credible path back to diplomacy. If Iran returns to strict compliance with the nuclear deal, the United States would rejoin the agreement as a starting point for follow-on negotiations." Good idea? Let's bring in Judith Miller, adjunct fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research and Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. Judy, great to see you. First of all, what do you make of the president's administration? They plan to announce tomorrow that the U.S., the UN sanctions on Iran eased under the 2015 nuclear deal under Obama are back in force.
Well, yes, they're going to announce new sanctions, but the problem, Julie, is whether or not our allies will enforce them. Yeah. And every indication is that they will not, because the Trump administration has systematically alienated the very people it needs to enforce sanctions against Iran and get it to comply with the agreement that it signed in 2015.
Well, I mean, this is all happening as Joe Biden is offering what some have called a failed strategy on Iran. He says that if he's elected president, the U.S. would rejoin the Iran deal while addressing some of the deal's weaknesses. He says, that he wants to go back to that policy that was set in place by his former administration. Is Biden and his Iran strategy a smart way forward, or is it a step backward to a flawed approach?
Well, Clearly, this negotiation would have to involve a renegotiation of the terms of the JCPOA, that is the Iran nuclear deal, which was signed in 2015 by 7 powers. The problem here is that Iran has not stopped its aggressive activity, so the nuclear deal has to be part of a broader campaign to get Iran to stop those belligerent activities. Now, you can't do that without allies. And when the United States tried to get sanctions against Iran reimposed in the form of extending an arms embargo last month, the UN Security Council, our allies, basically said, no deal. You withdrew from this agreement. You don't have any standing here. So what the United States really has to do, which is what Joe Biden wants to do, is to repair relations with the very people whom we need to implement the Trump administration's maximum pressure policy. You can't impose maximum pressure alone. The United States needs allies in this fight.
So then what is going to happen then? Because, I mean, like you just pointed out, despite the administration's intentions, there are other members of the UN Security Council, including U.S. allies, that disagree with the sanctions. So if they vow to ignore this step, where does it move forward? Well, here is the president at an event last night with words for Iran, and then you'll react.
But right now, I will tell you, Iran, if we win, Iran will be calling us within the first week. They're dying to make a deal. GDP down 27%. They don't have too much money for terror anymore. It's actually amazing.
What do you make of that?
It's just amazing to me the extent to which countries like Iran always find enough money for terror. And Iran is very insistent that if Trump is reelected, they are not going to knock on his door to make a deal. I've heard this from Iranian diplomats again and again. On the other hand, something must be done about Iran, and the maximum pressure campaign of Donald Trump has not succeeded in stopping Iranian misbehavior. So I think the Biden plan would have to be twofold. One, you have to return to the JCPOA, even though it has very little time left. But secondly, you've got to renegotiate a tougher deal with allied buy-in. That's the secret. Everyone agreed that Iran cannot develop a nuclear weapon and that we will work together to stop it from doing so. And the president did a very good thing in brokering the UAE-Israel deal, because that puts added pressure on Iran to come to the table. Yeah. So, ironically, if Biden has leverage, it will be because of the deal that President Trump made to further isolate Iran.
All right, Judy Miller, thank you very much. Great to see you as always.